Please join me in welcoming Head of Optimization and author behind the article, I Won't Fake It Till I Make It Anymore, Alex Head. Alex, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me and good morning.
Yeah, good morning. So, Alex, we first had a chance to meet in reInvent 2021, did a quick picture pose, and we've been trying to coordinate this for some time now. We are 8 months later, so hey, better late than never. We at least get a chance to get it done. I really appreciate you joining the podcast today.
Oh, I'm really excited. And a big shout out to Steph on my team because she did your podcast a few weeks ago. If you haven't listened, listen. It's so good if you guys are listening now. And as soon as she told me she was recording it, I was like, oh my gosh, I never responded to that email. So apologies on that. Email is not my strong point. I tell the team Slack all the way, unless it's going to take me a minute. It is going to take me a minute.
Slack, Chime, and then email. Wait, okay. So Steph was awesome to have on the show. So huge shout out to her. Thanks for a plug into it. In fact, let's get to a little fun fact about you. I heard you like podcasts. What's your favorite podcast?
I do. So I always listen to The Daily every morning. So I would say that's probably what I go to. But someone on my team, Eric Peterson, recommended to me recently to listen to Dead and Gone. And it's about Grateful Dead and these like mysteries surrounding them. So I'm like heavy into that right now. My husband, Joel, is big Grateful Dead fan. So I feel like I'm trying to connect to his music a little bit as I listen. But I'm a podcast binger for sure. Like I will pick a podcast and then even if I only have 5 minutes in between calls, like turn it on right away and listen to it and go into it. And then this one, of course, all-time favorite.
You know, that was sort of a semi-trick question, put you on the spot. I'm like, please say me, please. So, Alex, today our topic is screw the 5-year plan, be unconventional. And your career has been anything but conventional. Let's take a step back. You were actually an animal science major at Auburn. How the heck did you go from animal science to tech?
Yeah, so growing up, I always worked at a vet. It was right down the street from where I grew up. I think I ended up spending a total of 7 years there and I loved it. And so when I went to Auburn, and I grew up in Atlanta, when I went to Auburn, I was decided to go into animal science, and I went large animal science, which you don't get in Atlanta much. But I was hanging out with the cows, and I had an offsite with some of my team last week, and someone had the funny phrase of "from cows to clouds," and I think I might stick with that as my tagline for now. But about I guess starting my junior year. And I was not good at school. I think I graduated high school with a 2.9 GPA and I graduated college with a 2.9 GPA. But I was a really hard worker and I needed to like have real life things to work towards something, to learn something new. So about going into my junior year, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get into vet school. There's things that I did not know. There's very few vet schools in the country and they don't accept very big classes. And then I was like, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to be in debt and I'm not going to make much money. I was like, do I love animals this much or can I just have my own animals? And I wasn't good at organic chem. That was my worst one. So I went to my college counselor. I was like, I want to graduate in 4 years. I'm not spending extra time, but what do you suggest I do? And he suggested I stay with animal science to go ahead and graduate on time. But he was like, I've noticed that you've taken all of your electives in math. And I was like, well, yeah, because that's an easy A. And he was like, well, I don't think most people would say that. So he's like, maybe look at something to get your foot in the technology world. And then like 3 days, I graduated on a Friday. And then that Monday, I started in technology recruiting, kind of thing where like they hired all these kids out of college. A lot of it was commission based, so it was low risk for them. And when I was doing recruiting, I thought, okay, now I'm going to get an inside look into these companies in Atlanta. And I'm number one, going to be able to see like what company culture am I really drawn to and excited about. And then also, as I'm filling these different roles for them, what skill sets and projects that they're working on seem really exciting. And I knew that I probably wouldn't get into the role first. So I went with company first. And Weather Channel was one of my customers. I walked into that building and fell in love with the culture and the people. And the one of the leaders at the time, Bryson Kohler, who still a mentor to me, he was like giving us a tour. It was a big group of us, and the way that he talked about the teams and the projects, I was like, well, I have no idea what the cloud is, but I've got to be a part of this. So I waited, and financial analyst, mind you, I have no finance background. I probably had not even been in an Excel sheet before, but a 3-month contract had opened up for a financial analyst, and I completely, am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah, you are
Okay.
allowed to cuss. Don't worry.
I completely bullshitted my way through the interview, and the person who interviewed me, shout out to Landon, is still one of my very close friends. And they were like, do you know how to do a VLOOKUP? Do you know how to do this? I was like, yeah, of course, absolutely. One person in the interview asked me what cloud was. I don't even know how I came up with that. But I was doing like invoices for them. I kept hearing AWS this, AWS that. They were doing a huge migration from all these data centers, because the Weather Channel is like basically mandated by government to keep a certain like number of years of weather data. So there's so much data. And they do really awesome things like that. Like say you can partner it with Bud Light, right? And say when the weather hits this in Chicago, people drink more of this. So there's like awesome insights in it. And this is like 9 years ago, probably. And so I kept hearing AWS. And so I bought AWS for Dummies. One of Steph's favorite stories to tell on our Twitch show is I printed out our bill, which was hundreds of pages, and lined it up on the floor. I actually had like slept walk one night and just lined every piece up to try and figure out what the billing meant. And then at the end of my 3-month contract, I went to the VP that I had kind of pseudo been supporting, and was like, hey, I think that you can monitor and plan a little bit better for these like invoices that are coming in if you do XYZ. And they hired me full time, and I got to kind of grow with their footprint on the cloud. And then I guess probably 10 days after I started full time, I got diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And so I was like 23 years old, and I finally gotten the job that I've been working towards since I was a junior in college, the thing I thought was unobtainable. And it was a wrench in the plans. And I worked through it, and I don't know if I would suggest that. So if you're listening to this and you're going through a health issue, take the time, create the boundaries. But I worked through it, came out on the other end, thankfully, and then just really hit the ground running with what I was doing with Weather Channel and growing and, kind of being that AWS business owner. I took online classes, and it just evolved from there. So that was probably the very long-winded version of it, but that is the cows to clouds.
I think I'm going to use that title for this episode. Also, screw the 5-year plan unconventional from cows to clouds. So let me step back just a little bit. You were at the Weather Channel, and while you were there, actually in college, you liked math. And when you went to the Weather Channel, you were doing, and the recruiting part, you analyzed and you actually were looking at some of the capabilities that other tech companies were hiring. And then you took those, and did you actually take it and work towards those types of education and training so you could be more, acceptable into the Weather Channel? Or how did that work?
Yeah.
And
So
by the way, I want to stop real quick. I want to jump in there. I read your article on the, your diagnosis, I want to touch on that. I don't want to skim over that. That is very powerful message that you have for everybody. I want to leave that we're going to talk a good deal about it. I'm so glad the outcome, but I'm going to share everybody your article. I read it this morning and again, and it's very empowering. But let's talk about
Thank
how
you.
you went from recruiting to the Weather Channel.
Yeah. So, and I'm not saying that I was like some overly wisdom 22-year-old, because I don't think there was method to the madness. But what I did without realizing it is I didn't necessarily say, oh, this job has Python, let me go learn Python. I looked at kind of the projects and the aspects of what they were delivering that really got me excited, that I was like, a problem that I was thinking I could solve. Because I'm very much, as I said, I was not great in school, but if I have a project or something I'm working towards, I can learn anything. I mean, a good example is our team optics at AWS. We were, during pandemic, we were putting out all this virtual content because that was the easiest way to reach customers. And I wanted to have a way for internal teams to use it and be a little bit more accessible. So I started to learn some CSS and JavaScript to make this cool interactive website. And if I have like an end project, I can learn a ton. And so I more looked at like, what are their results that they're delivering that that I was drawn to. And then I wasn't afraid. Now I would say I'm not afraid to, but then it was probably more just all the energy in the world as a person in my 20s. But I wasn't afraid to change what seemed cool, right? I mean, I think when I first started in recruiting, I really liked some of the work I did with Turner Broadcasting. And I was like, how cool to be, drawn to some of these projects that they're doing with like the NCAA, and I love sports. And then I realized that like, that wasn't, that was way more of a niche. Like, what was more of the deliverable around that? And so that's how I let that guide me to like projects that then I could learn skills around.
So at the Weather Channel, you were a consultant or on a contract base, and then you got a full-time position. A week later, you received your surprising news. Like it was a setback to you, right? How did you take that? And what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome during this time?
Oof. Well, so I've always been, you read my article, something I've been trying to actively work on. I've always been a very closed off person. Like, I would say, I keep not that it's healthy, I keep my emotions to myself. I keep my feelings to myself. I just kind of put up those walls. I always have this defense mechanism of mine. And so I had, before, when I was like in contract, I had gone to the doctor a couple of times, and I was like, I have this swollen lymph node on my neck. And they kept on telling me, I think I went to 3 different doctors. It's strep. It's just lasting a long time. It's strep, it's strep, it's strep. And so I was like, okay, I don't like going to doctors to begin with. So like, right, hands off. And I honestly thought I was slowing down, and I thought, oh, I'm just out of my college years, like just getting tired, thinking that way. And then this random person came up to me in the gym, ended up being a heart surgeon, and said, I like don't mean to make you uncomfortable, but you have this lump on your neck. And I said, oh, I know, I've gone to the doctor, they say it's nothing. And he was like, well, have they tested it? And I said, no. And he was like, do you mind if I just get you in with one of my friends at the hospital that was near us? And I was like, sure, whatever. And then, within 48 hours, I had the diagnosis. And so and at the time, my now husband and I had been dating for a bit, but not like long time. And we were really good friends before we dated. So it was like, okay, here's your out. We could stay friends. And he ended up, I think, like moving in the next week. But at work, I had to be open about it with people that I didn't know very well, right? I was about to be bald. I was about to have to take time off. And it's crazy. The first person that I told on my new team was in town from Seattle. His name's Cameron. And we had all gone out to lunch to like welcome him and to Atlanta for the week. We were going to work on some projects. And I felt comfortable around him, and I just told him. And it turned out that his mom had almost the exact same diagnosis as me 6 or 7 years prior. And Cameron is now, I mean, he's Uncle Cameron now because he's so involved in our family. We lived across the street from him in Seattle. And I made these lifelong friends by being vulnerable. And I don't think that I realized that until later on in life, but it puts you in this weird situation of, these people were new to me. They didn't know me. I was the youngest by far. I was, one of the only females, and a lot of them had worked together for a long time. And so it was like, I couldn't hide it. I wanted to, but I didn't have the option. So it kind of pushed me into that realm for the first time, which ended up being a good thing, but very scary.
Were you ever embarrassed and scared to be vulnerable at the same time and share this personal information about you? And it's like you just want to be reserved, but now you have no choice because it's going to become obvious.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, it was, I think anytime, even today, that I am vulnerable, I get this like gut feeling of regret right after. And I think, people are just going to think, I immediately think like, oh, people are going to think I want attention, or, I want, their sympathy. And really now I have learned that it's more, I'm creating a safe space. You don't have to share everything, right? But I mean, for example, about 6 or 7 months ago, I went through a miscarriage at about 10 weeks. And of course I kept that to myself and my husband and our little family. But I've told people on the team now, and people that don't necessarily know me as well, because the team has grown so much, when I became comfortable to share it. And now multiple people on the team that I wouldn't even talk to regularly have come to and talked to me about things they're going through. And when you're vulnerable, especially as a leader, you're creating a safe space for other people to be vulnerable too. And so at the time, I was doing it more of a survival tactic. Now I try and tell myself, you own your personal information, right? Like, you don't have to tell anyone anything. But when you feel comfortable, or if you feel comfortable, you're giving people the permission to feel comfortable too.
I think when you open up and you're vulnerable and share some of that, it's not attention gathering. It's allowing others to feel that they are in that safe space and they can start sharing some of that information if they'd like to. And it creates a very comfortable working environment. Whether you're a leader in it or you're just on someone part of the team, they'll come and confide in you. They'll open up a little bit more about what's going on personally, so you don't have to guess. It's not like you're going to be pulling teeth out of them. They're just going to open up and share that. And I appreciate you sharing that information, not only about your diagnosis, but also your miscarriage. And I think it just opens up and shows you as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, I try to pay a lot of attention to leadership qualities and culture qualities of different teams and companies that I'm drawn to. And anyone on the team would tell you I'm like extremely, extremely protective of our team culture. And if there's one thing I'm the most proud of, it's that. And, that is the space to be human. And I think that we were thrown into that during COVID, because if you were a robot the whole time, you burnt out, and you burnt out hard. And we saw it, right? And I mean, especially at a company as big as Amazon, people are gonna burn out. They don't, are probably taking care of kids at home too, balancing their mental health, and like don't know when to turn, no one knows when to turn the computer off. My husband had worked from home for like 6 or 7 years by the time COVID hit, and that was extremely helpful for me to see him balance it. But we didn't know how to do that. And so giving people the space to feel and be human. Things like when the Uvalde shooting happened a couple months ago, my son was starting a new school, and I'm sure as it hit so many parents, it hit me really hard. And I told my team, of course I sent out resources for them, but hey, if you're feeling this way too, it's okay. Like, go ahead and take some time, take a breather, because people will want to work with and want to collaborate and want to work for people who give them the space to do that.
I want to take a step back at the Weather Channel and talk about being vulnerable, but also open it up when you don't know something or you want to ask questions. There's something I read in your article, and I think it kind of really speaks to where you were and where you've come to where you are now with your team. Were you always open about asking questions? Were you always open? So Amazon's leadership principle, learn and be curious. Were you learning and being curious openly or doing it, privately?
I would say I've always been pretty open about what I don't know. And I don't know if I've ever really thought, I don't think I've been asked that question. That's a good question. I've always leaned on assuming I don't know, because someone explaining it a different way can always be helpful. I do it as we hire people now. I want to only hire people I can learn from, right? It doesn't do you any good to hire carbon copies of everyone on the team. And that's part of the cool thing about optics is everyone has a very different background. And so I try, even in my personal life, when I'm meeting people, to learn something about them or learn from them. And I constantly want to gain those random bits of information. I love doing trivia. I stink at it, but I love doing it because I learn things. And I think some of that, I've always been very, very curious, but I think some of that too is when I went through chemo, because you get like kind of chemo brain, and then also just mentally I blocked out a lot of it. I don't remember a ton, and especially now that I have a son, there's some things that I would like to share with him from that experience, but a lot of it is just X'd out from my memory. And so now every chance I get, want to learn something new or write it down or, remember, and have those kind of like random nuggets of information. And so I think even at Weather, even if like a project didn't have to do with me, I wanted to learn what they were doing and what worked for them. And just see, kind of understand the rhythm and flow of what someone else was doing.
So at Amazon, you got hired and you had to move over to Seattle, but you're not there now. We'll get to that in a few moments. Some more interesting question. Actually, a spontaneous one. I heard you're into the NBA. Who's your favorite team?
Yes. So the Atlanta Hawks. So I grew up in Atlanta. Before I went to college, I'd gone to majority of home games from age like 3 on. They did a huge fundraiser for me when I went through cancer. And then when I got better, I got to play basketball. They surprised me to play basketball with Dominique Wilkins, like one of my all-time favorites. And so I am a big, big Hawks fan. It's been interesting moving back and now living here and being in the position to go to more games. I can't wait to get my kid involved in it too, but definitely big sports fan, Hawks fan. I used to, when I was little, which kind of goes into my numbers, I would like call out the stats as the game went. And I always thought that's what I would do when I grew up. And I guess it ties to numbers. So I guess I wasn't too far off.
Tying to numbers, head of optimization. I'm seeing a reoccurring theme here. Your trip to Amazon, 10 days after your wedding, you moved out there. Talk about don't being afraid of change, because that seems like that's a lot to take on at that time. Now for a quick interruption. A huge shout out to our friends at Veeam for sponsoring this episode. Veeam Backup for AWS can easily protect all of your Amazon EC2, RDS, and VPC data. Wait a second. They can protect my VPC data too? Yep, that's right. Simplify AWS backup and recovery while ensuring security and compliance. All right, now back to our episode.
I was horrified. I could be totally honest there. Vulnerability, right? So when I interviewed with Amazon, and at this point, IBM had bought Weather Channel, and I worked in Watson, and I was basically my job, and I had hired two people, so it was like my own little mini team. Was when they acquired a company, which was a lot. There's no secret. IBM's like constantly acquiring. That had a cloud footprint. Me or someone on my team would go out there and say, first off, like, just introductions, get them onto the contracts, all that boring stuff, but then also, can I help you, can I help save you money, and can I find some savings in what you're doing, can we make this more secure, those kind of things. And so at that point, I mean, I liked what I was doing, but I didn't really see a path. And I mean, this is the time when the word FinOps definitely did not exist. Even me saying like cost optimization, I doubt that was even on my resume, because I didn't know if, people would know exactly what I meant or think that I was finance. And so, how did it, AWS contacted me, and I did work very frequently with AWS. So it was people that I worked with a lot. Actually, my TAM, before I went to AWS, now we just hired him on the team. And so I'm super excited, full circle there. But I got hired with one other person who was already there to, well, let me backtrack. I interviewed for the job in New York City, and they flew me out to Seattle for the interview because my manager, or like future boss, was there. And my husband, or soon to be future husband, came with me because I was on crutches because I broke my foot a month and a half before my wedding. And so he came to help, and we were in Seattle. We saw my friend Cameron, who I mentioned earlier, and his wife Rhonda. And like, I mean, half a day in, my husband was like, we're not moving to New York. We're coming here. And I was terrified. I'm extremely close to my family. I talk to all of them multiple times a day. I'm a huge part of my nieces and nephews' lives. They would stay at our house frequently. I lived very close. I had never really lived out of it. I mean, I hadn't lived out of the South. Even when I went to Auburn, I was an hour and a half drive home. And he really pushed me to do it. And I'm beyond grateful that he did. And I started at Amazon, and I was working in global accounts, and there was one other person who was already doing it. And we were kind of testing out having these specialists that help you save money. Like, our tagline was just like, we're a free resource here to save you money. And at the time, global accounts was like 40 handpicked accounts that there was multiple specialists assigned in global accounts just to see. And I think even because it was such a nuanced experience, my headcount was even in sales operations. It wasn't even, not even like really a customer facing team. And I had no idea what I was doing. I knew like two people in Seattle. I'm pretty sure I tried to convince my husband to that I could quit like multiple times in the first 3 to 6 months. And I felt way out of my realm. And so, especially being across the country, I think my biggest lesson there is that it takes time. And even something that's an exciting thing to share, like, oh, we're moving across the country, and we definitely copped out by telling everyone at our wedding because they couldn't be mad at us.
And in 10 days, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, Amazon, they move fast. You can, they packed up that house and quickly got us out there. But, it's just because something is an exciting and great opportunity does not mean that you get there and it's like magical rainbows and, the happiest thing in the world. You have to kind of find your path. I mean, also at Weather Channel and IBM, that team I worked on for those, I guess it was probably like 4 or 5 years, they saw me go through it all, right? They saw me learn, they saw me grow a team, they saw me bald, they saw me sick, they supported me. And so going across the country where no one knows that about me, right? And I didn't know if I wanted them to. And I was just the new girl in town, right? Like I was just a new girl on the floor. Um, was very, very different. And it was hard.
While you're at Amazon, you received some surprising news, something you didn't think was possible given that you went through chemo and through the years. Do you want to share with everybody, which I'm sure it was ecstatic and surprising for you?
Yeah. Well, so a little bit background of up to that point. So global accounts continue to grow, strategic accounts came in. Um, my counterpart moved to the financial services side. So it was just me. And I was getting a chance for the first time to kind of like figure out what model I thought worked, how I would scale. And I just didn't think what I was doing was scalable with 70 plus of the largest accounts. And um, when global and strategic accounts merged, then our leader was Carla Trafford, who I quoted in my article. And I had known her since my Weather Channel days. She'd given me great advice in the past and not necessarily been like a meet every month mentor, but when I needed it, mentor. And uh, so I went to, I think like her first time talking to all of global and strategic accounts, which is crazy that at the time that fit in all one room. Now it's like so big. Was our Christmas party. And I went up to her and I said, I'm so excited for you to be here. So excited for you to take over, but I'm going to take a job running a FinHack program, which is something that I kind of incubated and started in global accounts. And she looked at me and said, you're making a mistake and you shouldn't do that. And she said, can we talk about it on Monday? And I was like, I mean, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt, of course. I showed up on Monday and her and my manager at the time, Hannah, had found 4 headcount for me to hire and become what later became the optics team. And so I started hiring, and I mean, I started interviewing. And at the time, this might not mean much to people who were not at Amazon, but I was an L5, so I was still on kind of the junior side, and not many managers were in the L5. And so I was kind of an individual contributor who was also a manager and was trying to hire and figure these things out.
Talk
And
about running down in energy.
yeah, well, that was it. So I had been told since chemo that naturally getting pregnant was out of the picture. And I regularly would go in for checks, more or less because they wanted to make sure that like hormone levels weren't affecting my bone density, right? Because I was in my 20s, and you know that's, you're not supposed to have those low levels and that kind of thing. And so I think maybe December I had gone in for just like my checkup, and they were like, yeah, everything's good, still, you know, still have really low levels. And they were like, your immune system's a little down, so just take it easy. It was reinvent time, so I did not take it easy. And I just thought that I was just running on fumes because I didn't want to disappoint getting this opportunity. And, you know, I'd gotten headcount without writing a paper, which is an Amazon miracle for some. They were giving me a really amazing opportunity. And so I just kept going. And then February came around, and just like a normal medicine that I take, I thought it needed to be adjusted because I just did not feel great. And my doctor was like, no problem. But, you know, just for liability's sake, you have to take a pregnancy test, and then we'll switch up your medicine. And that pregnancy test was positive. And I think my husband and I, in our 1-bedroom downtown Seattle apartment, thousands of miles away from our family, were shocked. I was also already pretty much done with my first trimester at that time because I had no idea. And
wow, things were changing quick.
Yeah. And I was terrified to, you know, I was like, well, I'm building this team. another kind of moment of vulnerability of like when I got diagnosed, not to compare pregnancy with cancer, but when I got diagnosed and I was newly, on a team, I was like, shoot, what's going to happen here? And I definitely got in my head about it. And I was exhausted. And I was traveling all over the place. And so it was this kind of all out sprint to hire the team before I went on maternity leave. And so I did that. I hired my last person the day I left for maternity leave. And then on that day, Carla, to walk me out and welcome me to maternity leave said, I think that you should name the team before you leave, because she wanted to separate us a bit from the more central kind of cloud economics teams. Give us our own internal brand. She was like, it just kind of gives me something to do the work chart with. Never thought that anyone would call us this. And me and Andy and Allie, which if anyone watches some of the optics content, the frequent members, wrote on a whiteboard all these different names. I have a picture of it on my LinkedIn. And Carla picked optics. And then I went on maternity leave, scared out of my mind that I was going to come back and this team was going to be like, why do we need her? Right? They didn't, and it ended up being the best manager experience I could have possibly asked for, because it showed me what I can step away from. It also showed me where my value is when I came back, like where I could help. And it allowed people to kind of onboard on their own. And when I got back, everyone was calling us optics. And that was 2020. I came back the day Seattle shut down for COVID. And my team was 4 people at that time. So March 2020. And here we are, we're in August 2022. And I believe we just hired our 42nd person, which is just crazy.
I did not know that's how you came up with optics, because your team is well known outside of the Amazon community. In fact, that's where I reach out, or if I'm like, hey, do you know a member of the optics team? And they're like, yeah, sure, or whatever. I didn't know that. That's a good premise into the birth story or the name of the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's still like Andy and I always talk about, like, would we have picked something different if we knew that this brand had taken off like this? This is kind of crazy. But
would we have a different
worked.
name? You know what? No, it's great that that's how it works out. I think that's how change and life has driven it too. During the transition of going on maternity leave, how did you learn to balance your work and your personal life throughout this transition? Because now your family's growing and you have to juggle it, and you're at home, everybody's home while your son's being born, and now you have to be even more vulnerable because the family's at home.
Yeah, and daycare shut down, and we had no help. I mean, our friends that lived across the street, they would, and they don't have children. We all kind of learned to be parents together. There's like 6 of us who actually all went back to Weather Channel days. They were there the day I told them all I had cancer, who we lived maybe within a half mile of each other. And we all, like, Cameron, Chris, me, we're all in technology. Rhonda was over there designing airplanes at Boeing, so one-upping all of us. But I think we would just take turns pushing Warren around the neighborhood when one of us had a big call, and we made it work. Because I mean, I also couldn't fly family out there; it wasn't safe. I didn't want, my mom to get sick, or I couldn't be exposed to much because I don't have an immune system, so I had to be very careful. And so we created this bubble, and we all figured it out together. And but if I hadn't have had Carla, if I hadn't have come back from maternity leave and still been working in Carla's org, I think it would have gone a lot different. Like, she championed me when I was on a call and I had Warren bouncing on my lap, and she really made it kind of that safe space to do that, and that showed me that it was okay. And But when it comes to prioritization, and again, this goes back to what example am I setting to my kid, but also to the team. And I could be doing a million things at once at any given time. And so, especially when we're all at home, you have to sit down and you have to think, like, what is the most important? And to me, absolutely what comes first is my partnership with Joel and my marriage, because I'm a 10 times better mom and we're better parents together when we're in sync, when we're a team, and when we're giving each other the time to kind of be together and have that. So, during the pandemic, we would say one morning, right now, we still do it today. One morning a week, we push meetings a little bit and go play tennis together and have that time. And then, of course, prioritizing Warren and being a mom. And sometimes the schedule is uncontrollable, and that's okay. But I think being human makes you way better at your job, right? Because when you know that you can step away and be a human, and have the support, then you can probably be a lot more supportive to the team.
I think the pandemic has taught us something about those who go into the office every day and then they're at home. They had two personalities. They had their home life and then they had their work personality. And what it did is now everybody's at home. You are at home in your own setting, but you're on camera. Nobody knew how to juggle that and how to be a human at the same time of their work and professional life. You're allowing people not only to be vulnerable, but to humanize them, that it's okay to, okay, my kids will step into my camera, my recording sometimes, and I will leave it in the recording as a, hey, what's going on? No, you can't, do that. And the reason to do it is I want people to realize that it's okay. I don't edit recordings when we mess up or we make a mistake. I had one where we were in the middle of it and you could see her daughter crawling under the table behind the camera to get past. And I told her, she goes, what's going on? And I was like, I won't tell you now until the recording's done, but we'll, and what it does is it allows everybody that things are all right, leave them be as they are. And you're doing that for your team. You opening up as a leader allows your team to say, hey, listen, can I push this back? I'm just having a lot of family stuff going on, or I got to go do something, whether they want to share more details or not. When they do share those, that you have a deep connection with them.
Yeah. And I'd say that I've learned recently too, that it's twofold, right? It's about being comfortable with what you're prioritizing and vocalizing that. And also, putting those boundaries up. I mean, I had someone a couple months ago set up a call with me at 6 p.m., which happens because I'm on East Coast and a lot of Amazon's on West Coast. And I said, hey, that is in the middle of screaming kiddo time. And the person responded was like, oh, no big deal. That doesn't bother me. They can be, they can be hanging out. And I realized I was like, no, that's not the right answer, right?
Yeah.
It's not about, having the not being on camera doesn't bother me or something like that. It's about, no, this is my kiddo time, right? This is my sit on the floor and hang out with my kid or hang out with my husband and be a human.
No, I agree with you. It's all right in some settings, obviously during the day if something goes on, but we're not in a traditional 9 to 5 anymore. If there's something happening at lunchtime, I actually block out my lunchtime with my kids home during the summer and I try to give them lunch and then we go out to the pool for like 30 minutes. I was like, I know we're on a short time, but this is the time that no meetings happen. And when you work on the East Coast, West Coast wants to start at your noon time. And it's all a juggle. When I ask people, hey, what works best for you? Here's my calendar. But if you don't find something that's convenient to you, let me know. I'll move some things around. But I'm totally respectful of everybody's time. Before we wrap things up, I have a quick question for you. We're going to get off topic to some fun facts.
Okay.
I heard you're into crafting. Do you want to talk about some of the stuff that you've built or crafted behind you?
Oh, yes. So I actually built the desk that I'm sitting at, which I can't move my camera around to see.
Oh my
But
God, I want the camera to see. What do you mean you
I
built
can
it?
out of other things, I put like a bunch of desks together and pieced it together. But I have like my desk, my dog's bed is under it. And then I have a crafting table over here and a puzzle table over here because I have to give myself the mental space. My my best friend Alex, which is kind of confusing, Alex and Alex, but has always taught me and actually came and spoke to my team and taught the team the importance of finding micro joy. And so things like micro joy is maybe being 10 minutes on a puzzle, or, getting to paint for a second. So behind me, I have, this is from my son's like preschool class. We bought in an auction. This I painted. It's Celebrate Weirdness and Innovation, by Anthony Bourdain, who's one of my favorites. And of course, my shout out to Seattle and the Hawks. And then pretty much like everything behind me is something I made. My Allie, who was one of my first hires on optics, gave me this wine bottle behind me that says "Do epic shit," and so I have that on there. And Savannah on my team made the origami balls that are up there too. And then over here are what I'm reading right now, and I am obsessed with biographies, autobiographies specifically. I have A to Z challenge, which maybe I can kind of see. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So I try to do every letter of the alphabet, and am constantly listening or reading biographies. If I listen, I always buy the book because I want to gift it to someone too. So that is a story of my micro joys behind me.
Alex, in your article, you have a plaque that says "Get shit done," and let me tell you what, you're definitely getting shit done, and all this. There it is. I will definitely put a link in the description below to your article. I find it very empowering and allows people to be vulnerable. I really appreciate you sharing, the insides with you. What is next for you?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you what's next, but I get final question because I have to learn something from you in this.
Oh, wow. Put me on the spot. Hold on a second. Okay.
What's next is I mean, stuff like this, right? I've talked on optimization and FinOps for the past 5 years, and I've been able to help be a part of this amazing team. And I've become more and more comfortable with the vulnerability and talking about kind of an unconventional path and how the anti 5 year plan, right? Like if I had put a 5 year plan together, I'd be in a completely different place. And, just looking at setting the goals and the things that are most important to you and prioritizing those and not necessarily putting a timeline on them. You never know, right? It doesn't, that can kind of bring you in. I would have never, ever in my wildest dreams had told you in 2020 that 2 years from then the team would be this big. I would have laughed in your face, like absolutely 100%. And so, it pigeonholes you to do that. And so I want to, I'm in a really amazing position of having this team where we kind of get to incubate these ideas. We get to be this little startup with the protection of a huge, amazing company. We get to kind of live by our leadership principles and the Amazon leadership principles. And I want to continue to grow that and also see if I can help and impact and continue to grow my impact from a leader perspective.
Your path is anything but conventional. All right, I'm going to leave the floor open to you. You want to learn something? I don't feel a little nervous being on the spot.
It's one question, and I ask this to anyone who's ever interviewed with me, or any fireside chat I've ever hosted or anything like that. So if you could have endless time to learn one new skill set, doesn't have to be work related, what would it be?
Fly a helicopter.
That scares the bejesus out of me.
Okay. This was totally random. I saw it the other day, actually flying over the airport, where I did a trial test where a trainer actually took me up and I was hovering around the airport. So I actually did one class and I was flying the helicopter, and I took it up over where I live in the Lehigh Valley, and I flew it up over it, and it was really cool. It was nerve-wracking and wish I could afford to keep going in the amount of hours and time it takes to do it. But I think it would be really cool and something to just be like, yeah, let's go do that and go somewhere.
Yeah, good one. That's a good one. I mean, I get the answers all over the place. It's fun. I feel like I I learned something else that I want to like try out every time I ask this question.
Are you going to try out learning how to fly a helicopter?
No, heights are not my thing. I will say that is the one thing that is the one thing not in any 5, 10. I'm comfortable with that being in every plan.
Don't say never, by the way, because that could change.
I don't even do well on flights, which is insane because I travel almost every week.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really ironic because I know you do a lot of traveling and go to a lot of places. So I'm sure you found ways to get around that.
Coping.
Yeah.
Coping mechanism.
All right, Alex, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody, head of optimization and author behind Screw Unconventional and Your 5-Year Plan, Alex Head. Alex, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
My name's John Myer. You've been watching the John Myer podcast. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify because guess what, folks? We're out of here.